Meanwhile, some members of NATO already are preparing for the possibility of Joe Biden losing in November, reportedly looking to, quote, Trump-proof the organization in hopes of safeguarding the alliance in case Donald Trump decides to withdraw the United States if he is reelected. Case in point, as the Associated Press notes, an initiative likely to be endorsed at the summit is NATO taking more responsibility for coordinating training and military and financial assistance for Ukraine's forces instead of the United States. Joining us now, founding partner and Washington correspondent at Puck, Julia Ioffe. Julia, good morning. Your new piece in Puck is titled NATO's 5 Stages of Biden Grief. In it, you write, quote, Trump's 2016 victory took the European and NATO establishments by surprise, but that won't be the case this time. After the debate, Europeans are starting to come to the conclusion that Biden is done for and that another Trump presidency is inevitable. One senior European defense official in town for the summit told me 2 months ago, I thought Joe Biden would probably win, but now I just don't think he's in good enough condition to do a real full-time campaign. This time, however, they're not freaking out about it. We can't control who wins, the official said, but we'll work with what we have. Those Trump-proofing plans, in other words, seem to have served another function too, calming jittery nerves in Brussels and making them feel prepared for when Trump inevitably pushes them off a cliff. So, Julia, I'll let you flesh that out a little bit and hear some more of your reporting right in the middle of that NATO summit today. Obviously, the president has a bilateral meeting with President Zelensky of Ukraine coming up a little bit later this afternoon before the president's press conference. What else are you hearing from NATO officials in town about what may be over the horizon for that 75-year-old alliance?
Well, what I'm hearing is that NATO officials are basically preparing for Biden to lose the election. So all that Trump-proofing that has been going on for a year or two now, they are preparing to put into place. Excuse me.
Bless you. Bless you.
Thank you. And the other thing is that some of them are talking themselves into the idea that maybe it won't be so bad if Trump wins. Maybe he won't pull out of the alliance. Maybe, they can appease him and pacify him if they spend a little more on their defense budgets. Maybe he won't abandon Ukraine completely because that would be a big loss for him. And Trump, as we know, does not like losing. He likes winning. So there's a lot of self-talk going on to try to kind of make themselves feel better that, after the debate, a lot of NATO officials that I've spoken to are basically convinced that it's a done deal that Trump is going to become president in November.
So let's talk a little more about what that would look like. Let's remember, I was there in Brussels at the NATO summit in 2018 when he nearly pulled the U.S. out of the alliance then. And that was just a few days before his appearance with Vladimir Putin in Helsinki. We have reporting this morning that suggests the Trump team's already signaled they're going to start sharing less intelligence with allies were Trump to win. The warning signs are all there. There has to be a great level of, as you say, they're trying to talk themselves into it, but there has to be pure panic, too.
I don't think they're panicked anymore. I think they were panicked in 2017, 2018, because if you recall, in 2016, everybody thought that Hillary Clinton was going to win. I think Trump himself thought that Hillary Clinton was going to win, right? And so they were completely unprepared. They had never dealt with somebody like him before. They didn't know what he was going to do. This time they know, and he's been telegraphing it pretty clearly. And so to all the people who say, take him seriously, not literally, I think NATO officials are taking him seriously and literally. They're just hoping that maybe they can kind of work around the edges and get him to do not as much damage. I do remember that summit in 2018 and running into a member of the Russian delegation on the sidelines who had been an advisor to former President Dmitry Medvedev. And he said, I asked him what they thought about Trump and what he was doing. And he said, he's a wrecking ball, but he's our wrecking ball. And
that has remained accurate.
That has remained accurate and probably will remain accurate into the future. We were talking during the break about reports coming out that Trump would pull back even on intelligence sharing with NATO allies, which is just, it's mind-stilling, right? He clearly doesn't understand what alliances are for if there's not money being exchanged or if he's not somehow personally benefiting from it.
So, one of the other major plots here at the NATO summit, of course, is the Ukraine conflict, and they're certainly vowing support, and we'll hear from President Zelensky later today. But behind the scenes, though, how do these NATO members think that conflict is going to end? Because there seems to be some real differences of opinion as to how and when the fighting will eventually stop.
Yeah, it seems like, so I've heard different versions. I've heard, it will, that Russia will collapse at a certain point, that it can't spend at this level forever. I've heard versions that, it will end at the negotiating table. From the Eastern European and the Baltic states, I've heard, that even if Trump wins and he tries to force Ukraine to the negotiating table, we've heard this kind of mythical Trump plan going around, which turns out was not much of a plan at all, right? That Trump would say to Ukraine, if you don't go to the negotiating table with Russia, we will cut off all military aid. And if Russia doesn't come to the table, we'll flood Ukraine with weapons. And the Eastern Europeans are saying basically, Ukraine won't go to the table. They'll just fight till the end. And that would be a really horrific scenario indeed.
President Zelensky himself a couple of days ago in Washington said, let's be honest, everyone in the world is waiting to see what's going to happen in November. Puck founding partner Julia Ioffe. Julia, thanks so much for being here. We appreciate it.
Hey there, MSNBC fans. I'm Luke Russert, and be sure to join me, Rachel Maddow, Jen Psaki, Lawrence O'Donnell, Steve Kornacki, Joy Reid, and many more September 7th in Brooklyn. MSNBC Live Democracy 2024. Click on the link for ticket information. We will see you there.